Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutt of HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Pro in HD first look at the upcoming hurricane season for the Atlantic Basin. But before that, the Eastern Pacific season begins on May the 15th, and so it's time to start thinking hurricanes once again. I know not everybody's favorite subject. For some people it is. They're quite fascinated with tropical storms and hurricanes. Others are quite fearful, and my job will be to help to sort of guide you through what you need to know, what can help you to prepare and better understand what you may be up against. That's what I do at HurricaneTrack.com. That's what I've been doing for my entire career. Been almost 20 years now, believe it or not. For those of you who have been following my work, yep, coming up on 20 years. And it's an honor, again, to be working with Hurricane Pro in HD. Very important apps, been around for several years. Lots and lots of users out there overall, obviously. We haven't had much activity overall since about 2012. Sandy was the last significant hurricane impact on a pretty large scale, and I would say that was a pretty big one. And really nothing in 2013 and 2014 was Hurricane Arthur on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Gonzalo in Bermuda, for example, just no big impacts to the U.S. mainland on a large scale. Now last year, of course, the Eastern Pacific produced Hurricane Patricia, the strongest hurricane of record, stronger than Wilma in listen to that, in 2005. I was trying to think of Gilbert in 1988 as another example. And hopefully we don't see anything like either of those three, Patricia, Wilma, or Gilbert, in any of the basins this year. But if we do, that's what we're here to help you sort of get through and understand what's happening. And with Hurricane Pro in HD, of course, you have some tremendous tracking tools, and this video blog that I will be producing at least once a week will help you as part of that tool set. So that's how I wish for you to view this, if you will. All right? So let's start off with some of the different things that I like to look at to help understand what we're heading into, some of the bigger puzzle pieces, if you will, of what we look at when trying to determine what the season's going to be like. Of course, everybody wants to know, is it going to be a busy season, not so busy? And I think, obviously, if you fine-tune it and look at it under a microscope, you would want to know, am I going to be hit by a hurricane specifically, wherever you may live? And obviously, nobody can tell you that on May 2nd, okay? That's just not possible. So let's look at a larger view of things and figure out if the pattern is more conducive for hurricanes than not. And in this case, we can look at a few things like the cold anomalies, the departures from normal across the equatorial Pacific here. That's the La Nina that's coming on. You remember in recent months we had a very warm area out here. You heard a lot about El Nino, and one of the strongest ever. All this was filled in with very bright red, as I'm trying to do here with my telestrator, and that has eroded away. And now we're starting to see cold anomalies, departures from the average coming up along the equatorial Pacific, while at the same time the Atlantic here, the deep tropics, has been warming abnormally so. These colors in here indicating some of these getting close to 2 degrees Celsius. We'll look at a zoomed in map in a moment. But then you balance that out a little bit with colder water even off the chart up here in the North Atlantic, that some speculate may have a chance to come down along the west coast of Africa, and then through the easterly trade winds, if they are strong enough, kind of mix that in across the deep tropics, cooling things off a little bit. Well, it hasn't happened yet. It doesn't mean it won't happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So there are some things sea surface temperature wise and the state of the El Nino La Nina situation that suggest the Atlantic Basin will be active, more so especially than we have seen in 2013, 2014, and 2015. So even an average year of 10, 11, 12 storms, 6, 7, 8 hurricanes, whatever, is going to seem quite a bit busier than just 2 or 3 or 4 hurricanes in recent years. So, and then if it's busier than that, you can just imagine, right? So we have a lot to look at over the next several months, that's for sure. And there's no clear-cut path to what the season will ultimately end up being like. All right, so let's examine a close-up shot. This is the west coast of Africa, the Lesser Antilles over here, the Cape Verde Islands. And you can clearly see through this area south of 20 degrees north latitude in the main development region here that water temperatures are on the right-hand side of the scale over here, not the left-hand side. Some of these pixel colors in here, some of these oranges right here. So, you know, a degree and a half Celsius in some cases above normal. That might not seem like much, but in terms of energy in the ocean, it certainly is. And then again, like I said, you kind of contradict that with this colder than normal water up here north and west of the Iberian Peninsula. That would be Spain and Portugal. And the question is, does this filter down and then get pushed westward? We'll just have to wait and see. Like I said, as of May the 2nd anyway, that's the date of this map, it hasn't happened yet. Looking at the La Nina that's coming on, that's what you're going to hear a lot about in the coming months. The reversal of the El Nino, the abnormal warming of the equatorial Pacific, to La Nina, the opposite of that. And look at this. This is basin-wide. From the eastern Pacific, west coast of South America, roughly over here, all the way over to the western Pacific on the left-hand side of the chart. And this very cold water, relative to average in the subsurface, the top of the chart would be the surface of the ocean, and then towards the bottom, 400 plus meters deep. And you can see this large area of colder than normal anomalies showing up, waiting to get to the surface and cooling things off. And then this is what it looks like when you look at it from satellite from top down. There it is. That's the cold water making it to the surface in these regions, and there is a lot more, as you can see from this chart, to come. So what are actual sea surface temperatures like? Most of you should know that tropical storms and hurricanes need about 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 26 degrees Celsius. And we call that, when you look at it on a map, the 26 degrees Celsius isotherm, or line of equal temperature. And I'm going to outline that for you right here. This is the 26 degree C line. And as you can see, most of the Gulf of Mexico filling in now. Everything south of here is even warmer. Some of these areas down here are 28 and 29 degrees. We're talking mid to upper 80s in some cases. But the rest of the Gulf has a little ways to go. Of course, by June, July, August, and beyond, this entire region will be plenty warm, unfortunately, to sustain very powerful hurricanes. What matters is how some of these currents set up, the loop current, if there's a warm eddy, a particular area of warmer water, and we can pick that out on some of these maps and show them to you, especially when there's a hurricane coming. Luckily, such is not the case right now. Off the east coast of the U.S., western Atlantic, water temperatures warming up nicely here as well, as we would expect as we move through the spring and into the summer. And you can see the outline of the Gulf Stream moving through nicely, of course, off of New England and the mid-Atlantic states. Still a little bit cold for me to go in, that's for sure. Some of these water temperatures still in the 50s, and in some cases the 40s, and that's just not going to work. So when might something happen? When might we see development? Well, one of the things that I can discuss, and will do so on these outlooks that I do once a week at least, on Hurricane Pro and HD, is to try to see when the windows of opportunity may come along beyond the 5-day, 7-day, in some cases 10-day forecast window. Now, these won't be specific forecasts for anything like tracks or intensity, but more so, when does the window of opportunity look to open, in which case something might happen. And one of those that we watch, one of those parameters, is the MJO, or Madden-Julian Oscillation. And that's basically the upward motion in the atmosphere, the ability of tropical thunderstorms to rise and spread out and continue to lower the pressure at the surface. And we call that the MJO. And if it's way out on the edges of the chart like this, for example, then it's pretty strong, a pretty strong signal. In this case, as you can see over the last few weeks, that has not been the case. And another way to say it, we have not had very strong or coherent MJO activity. And as such, we haven't had much tropical storm activity anywhere around the globe in recent weeks. But that'll probably start to change as we transition from the El Nino to the La Nina, and from spring into summer in the northern hemisphere. This is the GFS and its ensemble members here, just to point that out. And here's what the Euro, the ECMWF, and its ensemble members show over the next couple of weeks. Maybe a little bit of an amplification according to the Euro but more towards the Indian Ocean region. We'll see about that. Right now, it doesn't matter too much, but as we get into the hurricane season, again, this will be one of the things that we can examine to help us figure out when something might be happening. So, as I mentioned, the East Pacific season begins on May the 15th, and a couple of weeks after that, the Atlantic Basin begins its 6-month season. But it's interesting, if we look at the May 10th through the 20th time frame of points of origin for past development, there are 8 such areas in the Atlantic and 8 of them in the Pacific. So why not just start both seasons on May 15th? I don't have the answer to that. I'm going to have to look into that sometime if I'm bored and have nothing to do. When did the Atlantic Basin get a June 1st start time? When did that happen? Anyway, you can see that the first period that we start to look at here, the middle part of May, not very active, but you folks here on the Pacific side of Mexico, the Baja, parts of Central America here, this is your season. It starts to kick in here in May and on into about mid-November. And then again, there is the off chance that something gets going somewhere on the Atlantic side. From time to time, that'll happen. It's just not very common. So it's coming, hurricane season. And with that, I want to give you 3 tips real quick to sort of help you start to think about it in a frame of mind to get prepared. Because, we're busy. We have schedules that are probably just unbelievable these days. Even if you're single, you probably still have a lot to do. If you have a family, it's even more so, even more hectic. So let me give you my 3, I think, most common tips that I would suggest for people, especially those who have no idea what to do about hurricanes, all right, if you're new to an area specifically. First thing is assess your vulnerability to tropical storms and hurricanes, their effects, and mainly storm surge. Am I vulnerable to storm surge, and if so, how bad? And would I need to evacuate? That's what you need to find out. You can find the answer to that question at your emergency management office. Talk to your local National Weather Service or your planning office. The main thing is be persistent and get an answer. You want to know if you're in an evacuation area, if you're vulnerable to storm surge, and if so, what you're going to do about it. And from there, everything else becomes a little easier overall. But you need to know how vulnerable you are. Wind is something to consider, certainly, but water, especially from storm surge, is your biggest enemy, in my opinion, for most people. Now, obviously, if you're away from the coast and you live in a wooded area or you have a weak structure that's not very well built, then your vulnerability to wind is obviously a big problem, and you need to consider that. The next thing is talk to your insurance company. Hopefully you have insurance. If you don't, and you're financially able to handle that payment, renter's insurance and homeowners and business, all combined, all 3 are important. You need to do that. And that's my opinion, but I think it's responsible to have insurance, but not just have it and put the paperwork on the shelf or throw it away, even worse. Know what you're covered for and what you're not covered for. The hurricane headed your way is stressful enough, trust me. And for those of you listening and watching here, you know what I'm talking about if you've been through it. But if you haven't, believe me, and these other people can tell you, it is truly a stressful event. You get through the storm itself, and then the aftermath, dealing with what to do with loss to your home, property, your business, etc., is a really, really stressful time period that you're going to have to go through, and it just seems to linger. That's the really negative side to this. We put a lot of effort into preparedness for the storm itself, but we're not talking about how to deal with the aftermath enough, in my opinion. In my experience, I've seen it firsthand. So talk to your insurance company, get insurance, especially flood insurance if you think you need it. Find out, and if you do, get it. It's relatively inexpensive compared to regular homeowners insurance in most situations. I know that some areas are changing, but do what you can, because it can be a huge relief to know that you're covered. And finally, try to tie it all together with your family one night. Sit down, order a pizza, get some drinks around the table, and everybody talk about hurricanes. I bet there's somebody in the family who loves watching the Weather Channel, who loves tracking storms on their app, on their iPad, their Android device, the computer. It doesn't matter. They're a weather buff, a weather geek. Embrace that and put them in charge of keeping track of hurricanes. Keep the family up to date. There's a Jim Cantori in probably every family, and they just don't know it yet, right? You get the idea here. There's people that are really into the weather, and no matter what their age, embrace that and help them to keep you informed. You know, you remember when seatbelts were really coming into the forefront many decades ago, it seems like. The kids were the ones that talked about it. I remember I was a kid. I would always nag my parents, put your seatbelts on, put your seatbelts on. Before that, I guess we rode around in the station wagon completely unbuckled and leaving everything to chance. Don't do that with hurricanes. We know they're coming. We don't know when. We don't know specifically where. But get your family together to talk about what you're going to do if you're impacted, even by a tropical storm. Where you're going to meet, who's going to be in charge of what are you going to do with the dog, the cat, the bird, the bearded dragon, the whatever, right? And then really, seriously, anybody in the family that has any special needs, from a senior citizen that you're taking care of, to a child with autism, a child with some kind of a mental disability, physical disability. You know, all of this has to be considered. And if you do it now, it really will help you later. Trust me, because I have seen it with my own two eyes, and I have felt the pain from people who didn't prepare, and it's really, really burdensome. So don't let it be you, all right? Do the best you can. I know everybody's situation is different. Unfortunately, there's not a one-size-fits-all hurricane plan, but those 3 tips are at least a start. All right? Well, that's it from me for today. Most of these video blogs won't be this long, and I won't be lecturing too much, but I did want to offer some of my expertise because, again, I have seen it with my own two eyes. My team members have seen it, and we have experienced it and felt it, and I want to pass that experience along to you, and hopefully I can help you better prepare in your own situation. All righty? All right. Well, that's it from me for today. Again, these will be once a week, every Monday for the most part. And when we get into the season, if something's brewing, these will become more frequent. And you can watch these right in Hurricane Pro and HD and, talk about it and share your comments on social media, what you think about it. Send feedback to the developer of Hurricane Pro and HD, anything you want me to talk about, and I'll be glad to try to fit that in. All right? Well, again, I am Mark Sudduth. My website is hurricanetrack.com. Always a privilege and an honor, of course, to be a part of Hurricane Pro and HD again for another hurricane season. And with that being said, I'll talk to you again next week.